Hey guys, so 20 years ago, 20 years, Danny Boyle exploded onto the cinema screens with Trainspotting, propelling Ewan McGregor into fame. And now 20 years later, we get a sequel to that movie, T2 Trainspotting. And I couldn't be happier, to be honest. I saw it yesterday. I got to see the first one on a re-release in cinemas, so I was naturally very excited for Trainspotting 2. And turns out I had the right to be, because there's always that worry with a sequel. If it comes out 20 years later, it could be a bad movie or it could tarnish the original, but not with this one. It's not the case here. They had a story to tell, they told it, and I couldn't be happier that they did. Now, you can have that movie that only relies on nostalgia, but I feel like T2 Trainspotting took the Force Awakens route. They're completely different franchises, but what Star Wars The Force Awakens did was take a story, a new story, into that franchise, and it reminded you of why the others were so lovable, and that's what this one does also. It has its very own story to tell, but it has that nostalgia about it that makes you remember the original. Like, even in the opening scene, you've got Renton on a treadmill, and it keeps going, back and forward to when he stole that money in the original Trainspotting, and you see him as a young man, then you see him again as an older man, and it's like, yeah, time has passed. They remind you a lot in this movie that time has passed. So anyway, the plot of this movie is that Renton, after stealing the money, the 16 grand in the first Trainspotting, which doesn't sound like a lot now, but back in the day that could have got him pretty far. But yeah, he travels to Amsterdam and he's been staying there ever since for 20 years. And he wants to go back to Edinburgh because something personal to him happens, which we will find out about. And he wants to return to Edinburgh with his friends, so he meets up with Spud and Sick Boy again. Little does he know that Begbie is out of prison and he wants Renton's blood, naturally, because everyone knows what happened and everyone knows what a psychopath Begbie is. So, yeah, naturally, Begbie wants his blood, and it is part revenge story, part reunion story, part a story of growing up and realizing that you don't have what you used to have. And all three elements are done very, very well. I feel like this movie was made with the older Trainspotting fans in mind. Now, with me, obviously I'm only 19 years old, so I didn't even see the first Trainspotting when it first came out. I saw it in the cinema, but that was like a week ago. So when it first came out in 96, I wasn't even born yet, but I saw it when I was a fair bit younger, a good few years ago. So it still had that nostalgic element for me, but I feel like they never bash you around the face with the fact that this is a nostalgic movie. But they do, there is a lot in there that ties into the first movie. There's scenes from the first movie in this movie. So if you haven't seen the first movie, I guess you'd still understand this movie. But why would you watch this movie without watching the first one? So yeah. What Danny Boyle does so well is his editing is so stylistic. And in this film, there are certain scenes that happen, and you look at the editing in there, and you're like, whoa, that is really, really well done. From the beginning, Begbie in prison, getting out of prison, and that was done so well. And scenes like all of the scenes of like drug addiction usage, because obviously that's going to happen in this movie. It's Trainspotting, why wouldn't it? One of the best shots for me and one of the best visual moments for me, it was in the trailer, but it was when Spud was like sitting on a chair on top of the block of flats, and he falls off of it, and you think he's fallen off, but it's actually like a heroin overdose, and Renton catches him. That was really, really well done. I thought that was great. And all four of these characters, time has passed, but it feels like you never really left them in your heart when you're watching it. But all four of them, so Sick Boy, he's moved on to cocaine now, and he's like, he's got his own scams and business going on. With Renton, obviously he's gone clean, we know all about him. Spud never came off of the skag, and Begbie's just trying his hardest to get out of prison, because why would he want to be in prison, right? And all four of them, you see their points of the story, and you're thinking, yeah, I can see why they want to do this and why this has happened. I think the emotional core of this movie is Spud. Most of the emotional moments do come from Spud, and Spud really adds a lot to this movie that you wouldn't have really expected, because you expect this to be a movie solely focused on Renton and his return, and it is, but Spud adds a lot more to the movie, and I really, really loved him in this movie. He was probably the standout performance in this movie, the standout character in this movie, so that was really great. The third act of this thing, my fucking god, it was intense. So you can probably guess what happens from what I described about it being a revenge story. But the third act of the movie was so intense. I had my hands cupped around my mouth. I was like, holy fucking shit. You know, if this is going down the way I think it is, this could be the end of the Trainspotting franchise. You know, I will probably see a third one. But by the end of this movie, I was on the edge of my seat like, crap, please fucking don't. Because I wasn't ready for that emotional, you know what I mean. So it was like, stuff like that really does, like, it pulls me into a film when it's that intense. And that was the most intense thing I've seen for a very long time. So just wait for the third act of this movie. Even if you don't like this movie, you cannot deny the third act of this movie is absolutely brilliant and brutal. So yeah. I mean, the only real gripe I have with this movie is Kelly Macdonald. I mean, I'm glad she's in the movie. She was great in the first movie, but the problem is they just barely use her in this film, and I didn't like that so much because she's in one scene, and it doesn't feel like they really wrote her into the movie because they wanted her. Like, well, it felt like they wrote her into the movie because they wanted her to be in there for the nostalgia that I've been mentioning, but it didn't feel like she really had to be there. It was more, she was more a plot device. So I feel like they should have used her a bit better, but other than that, I don't have any major gripes with T2 Trainspotting. You know, Danny McBall has proved that he's a great director. He's still a great director. Ewan McGregor still just, he slips straight into the role of Renton. He's so good. The other characters as well, Spud, Sick Boy, Begbie, they all do so well in this movie. You know, it's great. Like the scenes, you know, of drug use are so well stylized. You know, like it says that it glorifies drug use like the first one, but it doesn't really. It shows you the downsides of drug use. It never makes you really want to do drugs. But you know, I'm not a fan of needles, so you'll be happy to know there's not a huge deal of heroin usage in this movie. So I wasn't passing out in the cinema, so that was good. But yeah. Overall, T2 Trainspotting is a nice trip down memory lane. It never overstays its welcome. You are so glad to see these guys back on screen, and I'd be happy to see them back on screen again. I don't know where they can go. I don't know what direction you can take Trainspotting in now, but you know, it was just so nice to catch up with these characters. I absolutely loved T2 Trainspotting. It will never hold up to being a classic like the first one. Like, there aren't any real huge iconic scenes. Like in the first one, you had the toilet and the baby on the ceiling. There's nothing in this movie that's really that iconic, but you know, at the same time, did you really expect there to be? It's a sequel to a movie that came out 20 years ago. You never expect it to be better than the first one. I didn't. I just walked in, I was looking forward to it, I walked out happy, and that's what I can say. If you're a fan of Trainspotting, I imagine you'll walk out of T2 happy. And that's what Danny Boyle was aiming for, and I feel like they didn't just do this for money and for people like begging for it. I feel like they had a passion to bring back these characters, and you really feel that in every single one of the four central roles. They all do so well. Begbie as a psychopath, Spud as the lovable idiot. You know, they all do so well back on screen, and they all just fit straight back into their roles. It's like they never left them. So, you know, I loved it, and I highly recommend you see it if you're a fan of the original. So, yeah, T2 Trainspotting. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Let me know down below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all soon.